coffee break. I'm Danny Wallace, and you'll notice that Amy Gildemeister is not with me, and I promise it's not because she is a ghost. If you saw our last one, we had a little bit of video challenges, and Amy was fading in and out of view. And I promised in that meeting that she is actually easier to see in person than virtually, and that is true. But I'm rolling solo today. I hope you have your cup of coffee here. I'm going to take a sip, and we're going to talk about real estate. So we'll jump right in today. And true or false? We'll start with a true or false question, and that is this, or statement: true or false? Most sellers, home sellers, would make more money by not remodeling before they sell. True or false? Actually, the answer is true. Not all updates and remodels and things like that are created equal. So for instance, whenever we're talking to our clients, we explain that it's not, you don't want to spend $20,000 to get 15. So some good studies into what is happening in the real estate market and kind of what rates of return you're going to get on certain things is really important before you start just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. It was a little spackle joke. I'm just kidding. Yeah, where's my audience? Amy apologizes. She can't be here with us. But anyway, there is something that actually just came out this month, and it is called the Cost versus Value Report. And to be able to share any information about this, I do need to read this copyright statement. Copyright 2025, Zonda Media, a Delaware corporation. Complete data from the 2025 Cost versus Value Report can be downloaded for free at www.costversusvalue.com. That's cost, VS, value.com. And I got to tell you, I go to this, and you can dial it down to regions, to cities, and I can't show the report on the screen, again, because of at least the chart, because of copyright reasons, but I can let you know that there are a few things here. So for instance, a minor kitchen remodel, $28,000 or so for spend on something like that, what we might call in the real estate business a kitchen refresh, that you could actually recoup. Now, a major kitchen remodel, if it was upscale and you were spending, say, $160,000 on it, so you went all out, the cost recouped in that type of situation is usually, at least in 2025, just over 61%. So really, you're spending money and not making. Now, if you're going to live there for a while and you want to live in have an updated kitchen and enjoy it, by all means, go for broke, spend what you want to spend. But if you're thinking about, should I do this to increase the value of my home because I plan on selling soon, it's really important to understand, number one, what the value of your home is, but then number two, what are the things that are the least likely to recoup the costs, and what are the things that I'm most likely to do? So for instance, again, coming in number one this year, the highest, at least on this report, the highest return on investment is still garage door replacement here in the Minneapolis area at around 232%. So especially, and I don't really know if they dig into what the the style of the home is, or whether the garage is on the front of the home or if it's around back. But most garages in most suburbs, anyway, are at the front of the home. And if you replace your garage door, your curb appeal can be drastically improved. And there's some really neat garage door types of upgrades that are available to you now. And if you need one done, I have some great folks that I know do really good work with garage doors. Feel free to reach out. So before we get into deep here, I wanted to just call attention to, if you have questions, if you'll notice at the top right screen, there's a little bubble with a question mark on it. So anytime during the webinar, if you have a question, feel free to just click on that bubble and drop the question in. And at some point during the webinar, I will get to it. If you're watching the replay of the webinar, obviously, that's not going to be available to you. So feel free to just reach out to me. My first and last name, Danny Wallace, at edinarealty.com. Shoot me an email with your question, and I will get back to you, and may even feature that question on a future episode here of Coffee Break. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it a little more here. Let's talk about some common misconceptions. One of the common misconceptions that we see in real estate when we're talking to folks about selling is, I need to fix everything before I sell. Sometimes that's true. Other times it's not necessarily true. So again, it's similar to doing the updates. When we talk about things that need to be fixed in the home, some things are way more important than others. As a matter of fact, depending on what city that you live in, the city may require a truth in sales of housing inspection. And in that inspection, there may be some required fixes that are required by the city for you to do. But even though they are required fixes, are not necessarily required to be fixed by the seller. Because we'll talk a little bit more about the market here in a little bit, but we are still in a seller's market. You'll hear me say that more than once today. So in a seller's market, there are situations where sometimes buyers may agree to take responsibility for those required fixes themselves. I've seen it happen in the last several months. I've seen it happen a few times where I've got a seller that has some required fixes. As a part of the negotiation, the buyers agreed to take those on. Now, that's not something that we normally advise just as a blanket statement as sellers, agents, but just know that it's not an always type of situation. So it's very important to get the information from a good source and work with a professional to help you understand what it is you really do need to do to sell your home. Next, what we're seeing with clients, every situation's different. And sometimes it makes more sense to put money into things like paint and floor refinishing. And other times it depends on the location and condition of the property. It might not be necessary. So as we've got folks that are thinking about selling, a lot of times I will have them ask me, well, what is it that I need to do to my home? And sometimes they'll talk to us after they've already gone and painted the interior of their home, refinished the floors, did some minor updates here and there. Sometimes those things are very necessary. And other times, if the home is just priced according to its condition, depending on the location, the type, the style, and the condition of that home, updates of any kind might not be necessary. But I will say, if you're thinking about selling, you're most likely never going to lose money by painting and finishing floors or updating your floors. So, but that is, again, I can't issue that as a blanket statement, but working with a professional is important in that situation, just to figure out what it is that needs to be done. So there we go. Updates, repairs. There are a lot of things we can talk about when it comes to getting your home ready for sale. Those are just a few, and those are the most common ones that we see come up. Now let's talk a little bit about the Twin Cities area market snapshot. So this time of year is interesting because it's generally slower when it comes to the number of sales happening. And that's typically because there are just not as many properties on the market. So for instance, on January the 12th, we've got our weekly marketing activity report that came out for the week ending January 3rd. Okay, so we're a little bit behind in these numbers. So we'll get the following week, the week ending the 10th, next week. But in that report, new listings decreased 18.9%, and that is in the Twin Cities area. Pending sales, or the number of sales that are under contract that are going to close, they also decreased 11.8%. And the total inventory of homes decreased 2.6%. So we've got this kind of downward trend. So don't let that be I guess it's not a big negative or a big scary story, but statistics can be misused in ways to cause alarm. So I don't want to alarm you. Even those things are all pointing downward. What you need to know, and if you look at the report, which I will make available to you here in just a moment and as a handout, which you can download and have a look yourself, is that's normal for this time of year. So this time of year, that's what we typically see. And so those numbers aren't compared to January the 3rd of the previous year. That's just compared to the overall number of listings and sales that are happening. They're decreasing. And so that's totally normal. Now, one thing that did change that's different from last year is the sales price increased 2.9%. So that's an increase. I'm not saying that's not normal. Actually, we're expecting a little more of that, a little more than 2.9% this year in property appreciation here in the Twin Cities market. But it is a change. So the median home sales price increased 2.9% to $387,000. Some other things that are kind of typical and stayed kind of flat. The percentage of list price received actually decreased a tiny bit to 97.4%. And then the month supply of homes, you'll hear realtors talk about that a lot. That just means if all the houses that we had for sale, all the homes for sale, sold at the rate that they're selling without adding any more. It's kind of like if you pull the plug out of the bathtub, how long it takes the water to drain out without adding any more water. In this situation, it's 2.5 months. And so really anything under, really for sure, under 4 months is still a seller's market. So that just means it'd take 2.5 months for all the houses to be sold at the rate that they're going. And, you know, that's pretty flat. We're at 50 days for homes, the amount of time that homes are on the market. So that's about the time it takes the typical home to sell. And we'll hear that. I'm a little tongue-tied today. I don't know what's happening. It's probably because I'm by myself and it feels like I'm talking to myself a little bit, even though I know you guys are out there. But you'll hear realtors refer to that as days on market, or you might even see that online in some of the websites with homes on them. DOM, that just stands for days on market. And so it is longer this time of year than it's going to be probably in June. So we will just keep an eye on that, and that helps us understand the direction that the market's going. So right now, everything that I'm seeing from these reports is we're kind of in a typical numbers situation here in the Twin Cities area right now. So that sounds good. Hopefully you have people ask us about mortgage percentages and things like that. What are the rates that people are getting? And that can really have an impact. Don't really have a crystal ball and can't really predict what's going to happen. But what we're hoping is that the rates do not rise and they continue to be close to 6% or less this year. And if that's the case, we're expecting a pretty steady market going forward. Let me check and see if I have any questions over here. Okay, no questions yet. I'll remind you if you're watching this live, not if you're watching the replay, but if you missed it earlier, top right, there's a little bubble with a question mark on it. at any time, feel free to just click on that and ask a question. But I'll keep moving here. And if I see your question, even if it's something we're talking about right now, if I see it at the end, I'll try to address it. And again, if you're watching the replay, Danny Wallace at edinarealty.com. Just shoot me an email with your question, and I'll try to get that answered for you. So let's talk a little bit about some myths that are out there. Myths versus fact. Pricing. Let's talk about pricing. So the biggest mistake Twin Cities sellers make isn't underpricing their home. It's overpricing it, 3 to 5%. So the myth is I can overprice my home and then just kind of slowly chop it down a little bit until we get to the right price. The problem there is that the perception of your home is so important. So it's like walking into a job interview. You know, if you walk in shorts and flip-flops for an office job, you might not be making the best impression, right? Of course, if you are it's a lifeguard position at a pool or something, maybe that would be great. So that first impression is huge. And so the first 7 to 14 days that your home is on the market, that's when all of the folks that are looking and have these auto searches set up where they get emails of properties and things based on their criteria, that's when they're going to get your email with your property in their inbox saying, hey, look, this new property just dropped. Here's what the price is. And if they look at it and it looks overpriced, they're going to move on. So it's really key to have your pricing done strategically. At the very least, just have it priced at what the market is showing it should be priced at. So that's where working with a professional is really important too, just getting the insight into the market and what's happening. Because a lot of folks will go online and just see what are the real estate websites out there, some starting with a Z, right? You may have heard of their estimate that is out there. They're getting better, but what we like to tell people is that online home valuations like that are great for entertainment, but risky for pricing decisions. So as a listing agent, what I tell my clients is this: that online number is important to the degree that folks that are buyers out there looking for homes, they might see that. So if what we're pricing your home is drastically higher than that, that could cause a little bit of, cognitive dissonance going on when they're doing the shopping. But at the same time, that's not necessarily what their agent is doing. So folks that are seriously looking for homes and they're using a buyer's agent, that buyer's agent may look and see what the websites out there, the public sites that are available to everybody might say that it's worth or estimate that it's worth. But if no one's walked in that house and actually seen the interior of it and compared it to other homes in the area that are of similar style and size, it's really just kind of a guessing game. That's kind of fun and entertaining to see, hey, what does everybody think my house might be worth right now? So if you really are interested in selling, having a valuation done by a professional, and as a realtor, I will tell you, that's where we start. That's kind of the start of our seller interview is, hey, let me do a valuation for your home. And then you can see how we work. And it's really your ability to see, okay, is what I'm being told backed up by the data and the information, and how professional is this realtor going to be? And, do I trust what they're telling me is true? And that's kind of where we start with the process of sellers, is by doing a valuation for them and showing them what we believe that home could go for. And you know what? In most cases, there's no charge for that. That's really the job interview. Now, we do stop short of providing, at least Amy and I stop short of providing our full marketing plan to everyone that's just interested, but we do provide some highlights, and we do have a few tricks up our sleeve out there that we don't share with everyone. But by and large, getting a valuation on your home is something if you have a relationship with a realtor or just want to get in touch with us we'd be more than happy to do that for you in just an effort to show you how we operate and really to give you an idea of what your home value might be at this particular snapshot in time. Lastly, one last myth we'll cover today, downsizing. We work with a lot of seniors. We work with everybody, work with a lot of first-time home buyers, actually, and a lot of what you might consider last-time home sellers, because a lot of our senior sellers are selling their home and going into senior communities where they're planning to rent or things like that in the future. Sometimes they're downsizing. So in a downsizing situation, when we're having conversations like this, a lot of times, I guess the myth is downsizing means you're moving from a large place to a much smaller place. But what we found is it's rarely about square footage. It's really about reducing your stress and your risk and the upkeep of the home. So for instance, there are a lot of townhomes out there that when you look at just raw square footage, they can be the same size as some single family homes out there. So moving from a single family home to a townhome, sometimes I've seen it where the townhome's actually bigger than the house they just sold. So in that situation, the downsizing is downsizing their responsibility and risk, and it's not downsizing the square footage. A lot of times it can be too, because folks are trying to make their budget work for their retirement. So that's another, I guess, step that you can go through as you're thinking about what's my next chapter in life look like as I plan. So for me, I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon, but I do have a retirement plan. So it's never too early to establish a relationship with a professional and find out what that plan could be and incorporate your realtor into your retirement plan if you're thinking about downsizing or just looking towards the future of what your cash flow might be in retirement. Now let's talk about what you can control. Like a lot of these things are myths and things out there, some conceptions. Some of these things with markets, those are outside of our control. And as humans, we really like to feel in control. And really rarely we are rarely in actual control. But there are a few things that you can control as a home seller. First of all, it's your financial prep. And that's what we've been talking about here. It starts with your valuation. So you can control it. Get a valuation. I know I provide my clients with a valuation or a real estate review every year. And that's something that you can get whether you've bought or sold with me. So I know a lot of realtors out there would love to make your acquaintance. So start with that. Get a valuation. And then also, as you're getting closer to selling, maybe talk with a financial professional on what are my options for maybe buying without having to sell first? What are my options for being able to maybe borrow from my retirement? So there are some things that you can do just to help the process go smoother, and it's never too early to be financially prepared. Next will be timeline planning. If you're like me and you're not necessarily planning to sell anytime soon, I still have some ideas on when I might sell. And for a lot of folks, that is, well, maybe after my youngest child graduates high school. Maybe it is, when I reach a certain age and I can start drawing retirement. So there are a lot of things like that you can go through and just try to figure out, okay, what is it from a timeline perspective? So it might be years out, it might be months out. So being able to have that timeline in front of you can just really kind of start fleshing out what the overarching plan is. And as you're getting closer, decision readiness is important. I talk about this a lot with buyers whenever we're talking about making decisions on making offers and things like that. But it's also true with sellers. So that's working with your professional to understand what are the big negotiating points right now that folks are seeing. What are the asks that buyers have whenever they're coming in with their offer. Are there any? Are they coming in at asking price? Are they coming in over? Are they asking for inspections? There are a lot of questions that a lot of things you have to make decisions on when you're going through the sales process, and working with a professional to understand what are the kind of current things that I need to be ready to make a quick decision on, because it can be pretty stressful if you're in this scenario where you have maybe multiple offers and there are a bunch of different contingencies or asks in those offers. Having an understanding of what those are can be really helpful. So when the time comes, you've already kind of have an idea of what your decision could be, and you've walked through it. So that's something too that we do as a part of the seller's consultation, is we walk through what's happening in the market today, and here's what we can expect when we do start getting offers. All right. I do have one story for you. I'm looking at the time here. It looks like we're about 26 minutes in, and I will get to some questions and things here in just a moment. But I wanted to do a quick client story to give you an idea of what we're seeing out there in the market. And they're so different. And you want to talk about, it's funny because when realtors get together, it's kind of funny because we'll have these crazy, what are some crazy things that have happened in the market conversations. I walked into a house and there was a stuffed deer laying on the bar in the basement. Things like that, which did happen to me. It was a pretty funny story. Another time though. But what's happening with folks out there, and how are they being helped? And there was a client that Amy and I worked with last year that was, was it the year before? Well, in the last year or so, we'll put you that way. A specific client that was not able to do much of anything. So when it came to preparing the home, when it came to packing and moving, when it came to going through and deciding what's trash, what's treasure, and what's a donation, this particular person was not able to do any of it because of their particular, we won't go into why, but they just were not able to do anything. So I guess my statement in the point of this story is to let you know, if you're sitting here thinking about, this all sounds well and good, but when we talk about painting and floors and getting bids and putting things on the market, you get kind of this pre-decision fatigue is what I might call it. And it can be scary and a little overwhelming just thinking about all the things and all the decisions that you're going to have to make. In this particular situation, this person had to hand the reins over, hand the wheel over to some professionals that do this every day. And that was myself and my business partner, Amy. And we worked with professionals that came in, packed, donated, sold, and delivered everything. And that particular client was able to sell their home, get a good value for it, and pay for their next chapter. So that was something that was pretty amazing, and it's not something that's uncommon. So I guess if that's you, if you're thinking about, wow, I can do some of it, but most of it I really don't want to, that's okay. It's something that we run into every day, and we have the resources, and a lot, not just us. I mean, there are a lot of folks that are in the same type of work that Amy and I are in, that we have resources that can just help you through the whole process and really put together a customized plan. All right, so let's go to questions here. All right. Okay, so this was probably a joke, but maybe it's not. But I know this person. If you're thinking about your next chapter, if you're a senior and you're thinking about how in the world am I going to pay for my care, in addition to having a home valuation done and understanding, what your real estate financial situation is. Understanding the way that things can be paid for is important. And I'm going to give a plug for a good friend of mine, Care Funding Ray. If you go to Care Funding Ray, that's CareFundingRay.com. That's the business that Ray is in. He helps people figure out how they're going to pay for what their next level of care is going to be. So looks like Ray's in here today, and I'm making sure I'm dropping that plug for him. So Ray, thank you. If you're still watching, thanks for joining us today. Let's see if we have any other questions here. How long will it take to sell a home typically? It depends. It really depends on the prep side of it. As you saw right now, the days on market are roughly 50 days on market. That doesn't mean every home is going to take that long to sell, but that's just the overarching number of all types of properties. So for instance, condos and townhomes typically don't sell as quickly as entry-level priced single-family homes. So if you've got a single-family home, say under 500,000, that's in great shape and in a good location, a lot of times if they're appropriately priced, those things fly. So it really depends. And again, specifics to your scenario are important. How do I find out how much I will get for, so I'm going to read into this question. How do you figure out how much money you're going to have left at closing is what I'm thinking this means. That's, again, there's something called a net sheet. You'll hear realtors, or an estimated expense sheet for sellers, where they will lay out, here's, according to what we figure your home's going to be priced at, here are all the costs associated with selling. And then here's about an idea of what you're going to have when you're done. And that's something that you can get along with your valuation. So you could get a valuation done and a net sheet with it to say, hey, if you sold your house today, after everything, here's about how much you would have left. I think that should go in everybody's financial plan. And that's something that would be really cool to get on a periodic basis, I would think, from a professional realtor, if there are any out there that do that. That was a joke. We'll do it. One last one. Do buyers still do inspections? They do. Sometimes, though, in scenarios where it's a super hot market, and let's say it's in the middle of spring at the peak of the market, and the house is something that's very good shape, similar to the single family home scenario I just talked about, flying under 500,000, appropriately priced. Sometimes if there are multiple offers, sometimes buyers choose not to do an inspection as a part of that process. But what we found, by and large, for the most part, most everybody does. And I will say, as a buyer's agent, because we work with buyers too, I always recommend doing an inspection. And if we ever have a buyer that wants to make an offer and not do an inspection, we always make sure that they understand that our recommendation is to do an inspection. But in multiple offer scenarios, that is a lever that you can choose to pull, of not doing an inspection. But you have to go in understanding what the risks are specific to that property. And sometimes you won't know what the risks are completely until you actually own the home and what you risked actually. So there are some things you can do ahead of time that can be helpful to see if an inspection is necessary. And on the seller side, if you're selling your home and you're getting offers with inspections, that's not an indication of anything that has to do with your particular property. That just means that they have an agent that's recommending that they do that. So they're taking care of the risks for their client. Wow, I feel like I talked a lot. Normally there's a little bit of fun, playful banter with my partner, Amy. And she will be here on the next one, hopefully, because I don't like drinking coffee alone. But really, with you guys here, I'm not. So thanks for joining me for coffee break today, guys. We will be doing another one. I've got to come up with a good follow-up. So we might do one on what types of things are, what are offers looking like? So for sellers, what are the offers looking like in multiple offer scenarios, and how do we go over, how do we go over those types of situations with our clients? What are the asks that buyers have whenever they're putting offers on homes? So there are some things like that we can talk about. And again, if you've got anything specific to your situation that you have a question on, please reach out. We're here to help. You guys have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you next time on the Coffee Break.